day. You need football in your life the TTNL way. You tap on your phone after fantasy play. Pause, not like that before you take it the wrong way. You have an idea what players to draft. Then tap on a beer like genuine draft. Study all the players, look close at the stats. A QB first, then a top running back. First you hear Cool Kennedy audio. Then on your screen you see Jackle, and Claudio. It's a take, never lies production. They keep it fantasy with Ivan's porno production. Keepin' it fantasy with your football fantasy. Keepin' it fantasy with your football fantasy. Keepin' it fantasy with your football fantasy. Keepin' it fantasy, it's a football fantasy.
Yo, what is up? I'm Ivan Vargas, and you are watching Keepin' It Fantasy on the Tape Never Lies Network. Look, Claudio is not going to be with us tonight, but I do have my boy here, Chris Jackle, in the building. Yo, what is up, Jackle? How are you?
Hey. It's fucking Tuesday night at 10 p.m. My main man, Ivan, you are right. No Claudio, no problem. We do miss our man, but at the same time, I think the two of us can hold the fort down and handle the fantasy acumen for the evening. What do you think?
Oh, I think so. I think we can handle it. You know what, guys? Welcome back. Another Tuesday night, another week down in the NFL, another week down in fantasy. We got a couple guys. Jason said he had a terrible week in fantasy this week. How about us? To be honest with you, I'm pretty good. Right now, I feel like I said at the beginning of the year, I was worried about my depth on the bench.
Okay.
But my big ballers are hitting. If I only had Breece Hall. But that's another story. My big hitters are hitting. How about you, Jackal? How you doing?
We've talked about it. You play in a few leagues and you have the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm making some runs in some leagues, with some of my old buddies, which is kind of nice. Like, I was awful to start the season. I've made some runs. I just not beat the guy in first place ahead of me I'm one game out of first place, and now I'm just like, I'm right there, and I play him this week. Great matchup. I'm super pumped. There's a couple leagues where I just absolutely suck, and I just continue to lose. And so I'm not even like making waiver claims or any fab bids, just because I'm no fun at that point. I don't want to steal from other guys. Just, hey, you guys go have at it. I made my donation. But yeah, man, it was a great week. There were some guys that were surprisingly big stars this week. But it's week 11, which is fucking crazy. Playoffs are right around the corner. Are you looking at playoff berths in some of your leagues here? How are we doing?
To be honest, I only have the TTNL league this year. Like, I've narrowed it down. Like, there was a lot going on.
Said you had like 5 other leagues.
I know, but there's a lot going. There was so much going on. Like, I just couldn't do the multiple leagues. But I got the TTNL league, and honestly, I'm dead focused on winning that league.
I love it.
It's the only thing I'm worried about. Like, fantasy wise, I'm just like, you know what? If nothing else, I want to win the TTNL Fantasy League in my inaugural season.
Nice.
You know what I mean? Like, it'd be awesome. It'd be awesome. I know Ryan Cox won it last year.
Yeah.
He's doing pretty well. He's in my division, the Luckman division. So, Ralph, what up? Actually, Ralph, you're able to watch us tonight. What's going on?
I like it.
Usually, you're catching us on the on the rerun, but glad to have you with us.
Too. Yeah, he's always out there pumping the pavement for us, man, which is great, man. Thank you, Ralphie.
No doubt, always commenting, always involved. We appreciate it. Like, you know what? Speaking about some studs and duds. Why don't we get into our studs and duds?
We could jump right into it. It was a fucked up week. We're Bears fans, right? And we were watching our guy do his thing Sunday. Seeing him go down with an injury, Claudio and I are supposed to be going to the game on Sunday, and I do not want to see the Trevor Siemian, Michael White Bowl and fucking deal with that bullshit. But at the same time, it'd be nice to watch the boys play, and but I'm hoping maybe I selfishly want Justin to play, but I don't think he's going to play. So
if we're gonna, all right, I hope he plays, and then again, if it's like where you're questioning it, just.
Yeah.
Sit him. Sit him. Let's not have this, I'm good enough to be a backup BS happen or something like that. Like, let's just sit him, get somebody else in there, Like, let's see what happens with Trevor Siemian and, somebody else coming up from the practice squad or wherever.
Yeah,
but
whoever. Yeah.
But you know what? Let's go ahead and start with the quarterbacks for this week. You had mentioned there were some big surprises. I'm going to go ahead and just list one of those
Kick it off.
surprises. Jacoby Brissett had a game, and you know what? The Cleveland Browns in a away game. I guess you could call it an away game. It's an away game. Were able to, hang tight with the Buffalo Bills. I know Josh Allen was hurt, but Jacoby Brissett, 28 of 41, 68.3% completion percentage, 324 yards, 7.9 yards per throw, had 3 touchdowns, no picks, was sacked once, and gave us 29 yards on the ground for 25.9 yards in PPR leagues last week. Jacoby Brissett out of nowhere, and I know, we talked about it, we obviously don't condone the actions of this person, but Deshaun Watson, we know it with him, coming back, Jacoby Brissett to have a performance like that against one of the top defenses in the league in the Buffalo Bills. It was, honestly, I was surprised by it. I was surprised and impressed by it. So Brissett was one of my studs of the week.
And just to piggyback that, it's almost like it's a showcase now, with Watson coming back. I think he's on a 1-year deal, showing that he can still do some things and hopefully play for a job next year. But yeah, that he put up a pretty solid game, which was surprising, like you said. But yeah, he without getting stabbed in the lungs last year, with Justin Herbert a little while,
that was Tyrod.
2 years ago.
That was Tyrod.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, you're right. Oh,
yeah,
Jesus, I'm all over the map here. I'm going to stick
right.
to my guy because I'm reading here. I'm going to say Claudio's dude that he's been all over for running backs. Jamal Williams had 3 touchdowns this past week for 24.4 fantasy points. He is, set a personal best for fantasy points this past weekend, which is nice to see. But he's taken over the league with 12 rushing touchdowns. He's exceeded 20 fantasy points for the 4th time in 2022. He's just the guy now, and I think he's RB1 in Detroit. Clearly is getting all the goal line touches. Most rushing TDs inside the 1-yard line since 2010 in a single season. Right now he has 7, which is the 3rd highest number. With LeGarrette Blount getting 11 in 2016. James Conner, who in last year had the 8 touchdowns right on the goal line, and then Derrick Henry and Kenyon Drake the last couple of years with Jamal Williams, all 3 at 7. So Jamal Williams has taken over the spot, and Detroit's winning games too, which is fucking wild to say. And they're all of a sudden relevant in not only fantasy but in the NFL picture.
3 in a row.
But yeah. So who else that you had, or any other top performers that you liked? Surprised you at all?
Yeah, definitely. There's a guy that's been, I guess you could call it a surprise, even though he's had his games, he's had his moments, but he hasn't been as consistent as people wanted, especially the team that he plays for in the Buffalo Bills. But ever since a trade happened for another player at his position, this guy's kind of stepped it up in the past couple weeks, and that guy is Devin Singletary. Had 15.7 last week, had 7, and this is PPR leagues. Had 17.7 against Cleveland this week, 18 carries, 86 yards, 4.8 average. He had a touchdown. He didn't have many yards on the receptions wise, but he added 2 points for you with receptions and had 11 yards on those 2 receptions. But he was stepping up. Last week he had 2 touchdowns. He had 4, just under 50 yards. But like I said, when you watch him, and I watched that Cleveland Buffalo game a little bit, he looks like he's running a little angry. He looks like Naheem Hines being traded for has gotten lit a spark under his ass, and he's ready to play now. So I like the way he's been playing. He's one of my studs of the week. Jackle, you got anybody else?
Well, I agree with you. They get Hines in there, who you thought was going to all of a sudden have a little bit more fantasy relevancy, and it has been the Devin Singletary show. But at the same time, Mr. Cook has been getting some touches out of that backfield.
That's right.
I'm gonna bring him up later on down the road here, but there's another dude that I hate to bring it up, but he's showing to be something, maybe a star in the making out in Green Bay with Christian Watson. I hate to say that. I hate to repeat myself as well, but he had another big weekend. Him and Rodgers clearly have put together a string of games where you're seeing the chemistry, the stuff that he was bitching about at the beginning of the year, Rodgers with respect to his receivers, you're seeing this come to fruition with Watson. So you have your second straight game in which he had over 20 points, a monster game last week he had 32.7, but this past week, another 20-pointer. So he's a star. I feel like he's that this rookie receiver that's just turning out to be the guy that that we talked about on Draft Mob extensively, and there were people that really like Christian Watson. There were people that didn't like him, but he's turning out to be a diamond in the not diamond in the rough fucking second round pick, but still a guy that's producing as a rookie. So he was a star. He was a star for me, in a couple of leagues I'd picked up in and have a couple of shares. So I benefited from that. So it's fucking Packer, fuck them. But
right. No, I agree.
I want to win money, right?
I got you.
So.
No, it's what it's about. Christian Watson. Well, some of them. The TTNL obviously, and I'm going to go ahead and answer this question. The donations were not agreed upon. We had talked about it. It never really came to fruition. So we're going.
We can still get to it, yeah, and that's something as the season gets on. This is something we were trying to do with respect to the donations, where we were going to pick a charity, and if you wanted to, you could make a small donation. We will still get to that, and that's whether it is you're in the league or not. But at the same time, this is going to be sent out to the people in the league. Claudio, Ivan, and I will make sure we get that information out to you guys before the playoffs even kick off, which is right around the corner. There's no pressure there either. But with that being said, do appreciate you bringing that up, which shows your eagerness to participate. So thank you. But yeah, we will we'll get the details out when we can iron out the details for us, right, Ivan?
Yeah, definitely. But let me go ahead and start with Chris. Let me add to your Christian Watson.
Yeah.
He has 5 touchdowns in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
He's been a touchdown machine, 3 touchdowns last week,
Yep.
2 this week. Like I said, I know I drafted him and I'm like, I dropped him.
Did you hold him the whole time? You dropped him?
No, I dropped. I held him until I couldn't hold him anymore. So it wasn't like I wanted to drop him or anything like that. It was just like, I can't hold you anymore because I had injuries. Things happened. Elijah Mitchell got injured early. Week 1,
yeah,
so it was rough for me. So I had to make a decision there about keeping somebody I picked up that was good and then dropping him. But I guess I could be, just kick myself in the ass right now because Christian Watson has been on fire. And there was a reason why I drafted him. I knew he was going to be rough sledding to start, but as of right, the past couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, but it's been pretty good for Christian Watson. And Green Bay hasn't been doing great.
And that's why, too, though, the negative script, the script has played in his favor, right? Like they had to throw the ball, and I didn't mean to just cut you off there, so I apologize. But he definitely stretches the defense. And with respects, he's shown the ability to run away from the coverage, Yeah, he's a guy that, if you drop him early on, it's understandable because you need roster spots. And if a guy's not performing, and receivers were tough to come by early on if you didn't draft well. So it could be a thin market, and then you're kind of just trying to go week to week, and that's never fun. So, is there another star that you had last week? That
there's actually a few. Actually, I think we're going to sit on a couple of surprise stars. I'm going to go with Jimmy Garoppolo. Yesterday had a big game I know it was touchdown latent, or touchdown dependent, but 20 of 29, like 69 percent completion percentage. He had just over 220 yards. He had a 228, 7.9 yards average. Like I said, the 4 tuds, 25.4 points. Jimmy Garoppolo, there was a lot of, they were ready to ship him off. They were telling him that he was going to leave, and then all of a sudden they made this huge trade. Like they decided not to sign him, and it ended up being the best thing that they could have done because Trey Lance goes down week 1. If you think about it, Trey Lance and their starting quarterback and starting running back goes down week 1. Yeah, and you're able to go ahead and plug a guy who was just in the Super Bowl, but 4 or 5 years ago, 3 years ago. Yeah. So, I'm good for him. Go ahead.
It just the catalyst I think for them though was that CMC trade, because after week 6 they were 3-3. They were averaging 20.8 points a game, 340 yards of total offense, and their third down percentage is 41%. Right, so then they make the trade for CMC. They're 3-1 since then. They're averaging they're over a touchdown more a game, 28.5 points a game, 400 yards of total offense, and their third down percentage is 55%. So they're much more efficient. Having CMC helps, benefits everybody. I mean, if you watch the game on last night, the way in Mexico, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, I mean, all the stars produced there because I think CMC, it makes it such a challenge. I mean, it wasn't just CMC because your man Elijah Mitchell, he was out there doing his thing, and that's a problem in their backfield with those two guys. And they both put up numbers for fantasy relevancy, but like that CMC trade, it makes Jimmy's job a lot easier. I mean, he's still handing the rock off, but what were his passing stats again?
It was 20 of 29, 69% completion. 69
30 times,
completion
right?
percentage. No, under 30 times.
Well, I'm just saying they threw the ball almost 30 times. That's solid.
Yeah, that's solid. And look, the yardage I'm not really worried about. 220. As long as he's able to connect with guys in the end zone, that's all you have to ask for. Like that's all you can ask for. Be efficient.
Fantasy relevancy there.
Yeah, hit the guys when they're open. That's Jimmy G. At his best, that's Jimmy G. Maybe he could put up a 300-yard game. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't say that you would see some crazy stat like 3 or 400 or 350, 400. And like 5 tuds or something like that.
He's only thrown over 300 yards once this year.
Exactly. So I don't see that happening, but efficiency and, if they get into they have a great running attack. If they get into the red zone, CMC's available, Kittle's available, Brandon Ayuk, we both agreed that Debo. How about Debo's run, that reverse run yesterday?
Dude,
that was
the blocking
just
on that was amazing. They broke it down on McAfee today, and it was like,
just mauling.
Everyone is running downfield, just killing people.
And I want to talk about it later, but that Cardinals team, we talked about it. That Cardinals team, I think, is going to be giving away some maybe quality, players when it all's said and done. Maybe a stud. Hopkins. Maybe send me DeAndre. Yeah. Bring DeAndre over.
Yeah,
come to me, DeAndre.
Please.
But
restructure your contract. But anyway,
no, definitely. But yeah, I agree. Garoppolo, he did a great job, very efficient. But let's continue on with the studs. You got anybody else?
I mean, Tony Pollard had a monster day. We brought up Mr. Pollard. That was Claudio's guy last week. Claudio hit the nail on the head last week. He was, a few weeks in a row, and he's he's been doing pretty well. So he's not here, so we'll toot the horn for him. The Claudio horn. We'll give him his due.
Yo.
Exactly. A little drop. We need one of those Bratcher drops there. That'd be perfect for there. But I'm going to say a former Packer that his quarterback was a crying mess back in week 10, comes out week 11 and has a monster day. And Mr. Davante Adams. Another 30+ fantasy point week. He has a staple of those, 33.1, giving him 97.3 fantasy points in the last 3 weeks combined, which is the second most in his career over that same span. The record for him is actually 108 fantasy points, just so you know, back in 2020 from week 7 to 9. But no, he had a huge fucking week.
Dude, I'll say this about Davante. I drafted Davante. My top 2 were Josh Allen and Davante Adams.
Nice.
And like I said, when my big dogs eat, they eat. Like the depth might not be there, which worries me, rightfully so, I feel like. But when my big dogs eat, they eat. And dude, Davante has been on a tear. I know I talked about Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson had a bad game. We'll get to that in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
But Davante has just been out of this world. A killer on a bad team. It's and you know what? Like I said, I like David, Derek Carr. I really do. I really believe he's a quality quarterback in the league. Just the team sucks. But Davante just continues to put up points.
13 targets, dude.
I never thought, like in my wildest dreams, I didn't think that they were, even with the connection to college,
shit,
I didn't think that they were going to have this type of connection where it's pretty much every week. Like I believe they could put he could put up 30 points with Derek Carr every week.
I mean, he had 26 points in week 9, or 26.6 week 9 on 17 targets for 10 catches. He had 18.6 points with 14 targets and 9 catches, 13 targets and 7 catches last week for 26 points. That's 44 targets in 3 weeks. I mean, there aren't many guys that get that kind of looks. I mean, he was getting that in Green Bay with Rodgers. I mean, he threw it to him every fucking play in the second half of every game. So, you have like 18 targets a game, but yeah, dude, it's interesting though that they suck. That's the problem. The Raiders are just bad.
That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. It's just they suck, and you're like, I mean, fantasy wise, you're attracted to the player, but when you think about it on a football level, you're like, God, how can they, with the talent that they have, even
how
Josh
are they
Jacobs,
that bad?
Josh Jacobs is having a good year. You know what I mean? It's been for the Raiders. It's been giving up big leads late and coaching.
Yeah.
I don't know if McDaniels is going to survive a couple
They said
years.
they can't, so they've been talking about that, and not that this is a fantasy thing, but they can't afford to fire him. They don't have the money to be once they fire him and hire another coach, it'll be the third coach they have on the payroll. They're still paying Gruden. Actually, I think they got rid of him for cause because of some kind of contractual language. I think they were able to, but he's suing, so he may end up getting that bread. Who knows?
Right,
but
right.
My name's Paul, and that's between y'all.
Yeah.
And then they'd have to pay McDaniel, if they fire his ass. So, the little weird dude with the haircut and the fucking backpacks and shit out in Vegas, I don't think he has the bread like his dad did. So I think he's cash strapped, and he's, I think, one of the few owners that are financially struggling in this weird printing press of fucking U.S. currency here, which we call the NFL.
Right.
But I digress. Do you want to? Are there any other stars? Do you want to kind of swing over to some duds and get into the meat and potato? What do you want to do?
No, we'll stick with the studs,
give me one,
because there's a couple of guys. Demarcus Robinson of the Baltimore Ravens, 9 receptions on 9 targets, 128 yards, 14.2 yards average, had a long of 31. 4 receptions over 20 yards, didn't have a touchdown, but put up 21.8 points. Had himself a day for Baltimore. And Baltimore, I mean, name the last great Baltimore wide receiver. And don't say Steve Smith, because he was a Panther prior to. So,
Rashad Bateman was supposed to be the guy. And since he's been out, this dude has been just completely killing it, man. I feel like he's a must start for me if you have him in your roster, if you have him on, if you were smart enough. And we didn't talk about him, but he's a guy, I think, in week 8, he had 64 yards on 6 catches. Week 9, he had 1 catch for 12 yards. And then, at week 11, like you said, he had 9 receptions, he caught every ball thrown to him, 9 for 9 on 128.
I just asked that just because it's like, it's similar to KC. It's similar to KC. Like KC before this year, you knew who their best receiver was.
Oh yeah.
Right? You knew who their best receiver was. Baltimore, I mean, other than Andrews, I guess you could put Andrews as a wide receiver, or he's a pass catcher, but he's not a receiver. I can't recall their, a great Baltimore wide receiver. And nobody say Jacoby Jones either. All right, that Super Bowl was a one-off. Okay, so and either way, it was just it hasn't been a full deck for a guy like Lamar Jackson. I hope it's not that way for our boy, our guy Justin Fields. I really hope it's not. I really hope we go out and get some help for him, mainly that offensive line.
Yeah.
But at receiver as well. I need to see more talent. I need to see more speed at receiver. But for right now, for this week, Demarcus Robinson went ahead and had himself a hell of a week. Another guy real quick that I want to go ahead and mention.
Yeah, are you going to bring him up? Go ahead. Are you going to click the comment?
No, I didn't see the comment. I was looking at another screen.
Go ahead. You go ahead. Give me your guy. You go. Continue your damn thought.
All right. Joshua Palmer, 8 receptions, 10 targets, 106 yards, 13.3 yards per reception. Had a long of 50. 4 receptions, over 20 yards, 2 tuds, 30.6 on the fantasy points. In this, I'm going strictly PPR. Yep. Sorry, guys. But Joshua Palmer, we talked about the struggles of the Los Angeles Chargers. I almost said San Diego. The Los Angeles Chargers.
You wouldn't have been wrong.
I shouldn't be wrong because there's no point in them being there. But anyway, I like he's a guy that keeps popping up, here and there. Like maybe go out and get him. I'm reading. Maybe take a shot at him. Had himself a hell of a day here. I don't know if just similar to Demarcus Robinson and what Ralphie was saying. Him being hesitant to pick him up. I'm nervous about it being that one-off. Because we just we seen Westbrook Akine have that 30-point game, and then obviously come back to earth week the next week. How do you feel about a Joshua Palmer? Is this a real thing, or is this a guy that's going to come back down to earth?
The thing that sucks for him, is his quarterbacks got scrambled eggs for brains right now, and so it's tough with the whole concussion thing with Stafford. But in the last 4 games that he's played, he missed week 7 with an injury. So because they had a bye week 8, so he sat out. But he's averaging 10 targets a game. I mean, so he's getting the rock. So in week 6, he had 12 targets for 9 catches, and then in week 9, he had 10 for 8, and week 10, 8 for 3, but then 10 for 8 last week. But the fantasy numbers are there, like you said, 30 points this past week. He had a 7.4 in week 10. 19 points in week 10, he had 19 points. He's had double digits in more than half of his games he's played in. So I feel like he's a guy that if you have him out there, and he's rostered in most leagues at this point because they are depleted with receivers in LA, or almost at San Diego. So I think you could start him with confidence. I don't know if he's necessarily matchup related either because they have to throw the ball. But if Stafford's out, I just don't think you can trust it. I think but that's how. But Keenan Allen and Michael Williams,
let's go ahead. Yeah, I agree with it. Let's just go ahead and say, take a shot at him. Yeah. Right, take a shot. He's Ralphie said he should be 80% right now. On Fantasy Pros, he's only, was it 60? I just switched over. 64.3. There you go. 64.3.
Herbert's fine. Stafford is on the other team in LA.
Right. Herbert's okay.
Yeah,
Herbert's okay.
Totally
Stafford's going to come up in our injury report later. But let's go ahead and switch it over to the duds of the week. I'll kick it off again. He's a guy that's on my team. He was my number 1 pick overall, I believe. Yes, he was my number 1 pick overall. Or was he my number 2? Either way, he was the top 2 pick in my fantasy league. Josh Allen had himself a poor performance. I know he's hurt. I'm not going to give him the excuse because he's Josh Allen. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But 18 to 27, he had 66.7 completion percentage, which is good. 197 yards, 7.3 average, which is solid. 1 tud, but that was it. Like there was no rushing. There was nothing else. That Browns defense did a pretty decent job on him. I mean, he wasn't. It didn't look obvious that he was hurt or something like that. He looked like he was fine, but maybe just the traveling, the snow. Like they had 77 inches of snow.
Yeah, that was
had
pretty
to
impressive.
Move everything. Last minute. Like I said, I don't want to make excuses. You had a bad game. Had a bad game. And that's pretty much it. He only offered up 12.6 points for fantasy owners in PPR leagues, but you don't have to worry about him receiving anything. 12.6 is not good. That's a dud for me.
Couple of duds for me. Saquon Barkley, obviously, he expected big things with that matchup, and he just threw up a stinker against the Lions. 5.5 fantasy points, 17 touches. I think it was 22 yards. 15 rushing attempts, just awful all around. And then another running back that was awful was Dameon Pierce. I know we talked about him last week, but he just had a tough showing. 3.7 fantasy points, 10 carries, 2 catches. That's not going to get you much. More likely a loss if he's one of your starting running backs.
Right.
When you're getting that kind of production out of those guys. Any duds that you have, that aren't running back related?
Well, actually, I'm just going to stick with the running backs.
Okay.
Real quick. We'll stick with the running backs. Dalvin Cook, 7.2. Yeah. Not a good day for Dalvin. He had 11 carries for 72 yards. I mean, he put in, some effort, but then he had 1 target, no receptions, 0 yards. Dalvin's, he's an all-purpose back. You know, you could use him. You could use him for the running game, the screen game, the passing game, whatever you need to do. You could spread him out wide. Whatever you need to do with Delvin, he's usually pretty solid. But this week he was very, very poor, and he only offered up 7.2 fantasy points for fantasy owners. Another guy I want to go ahead and give the dubbing to is Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon 9.2 fantasy. It wasn't Joe Mixon. I'm sorry, Joe Mixon was hurt. Mixon got hurt. So I wouldn't give it to him, but it sucks for fantasy owners that had Joe Mixon this week
because his replacement went off.
Right. Tyler Algier. I'll go with Tyler Algier. The Bears are the second worst rushing defense in the league. He only was able to muster up 7.4 fantasy points for fantasy owners. So, and I'm usually like, hey, go ahead and start guys, against like the Texans and stuff like that. And I've been pretty consistent with guys starting, running backs starting against the Bears as well. And I was like, man, I think Tyler Algier might have a solid week. Obviously, he didn't, but you wonder why he didn't. He seems to be like their best back. But I think I don't know. I think there's.
Well, they got crushed. They were down. They had to get away from the. You thought that I see here in the comments, though. I thought they'd throw the ball to him a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was just a bad performance. They got absolutely crushed. That was one of my duds was Kirk Cousins. So, I mean, I think it leads right into it. I mean, he had 2.2 fantasy points. He had 105 passing yards. Him and Zach Wilson were fucking neck and neck for just completely sucking fucking pond water this past Sunday because they were both duds. Between the two of them, adding them up, they didn't even equal 10 fantasy points. And so, those were guys that just absolutely sucked. And you saw just the comparisons and bringing it up real quick with Justin Fields and Zach Wilson, how you handle a loss and how you handle the media and more importantly, how you handle the locker room with your teammates. We, as Bears fans, I think are really lucky to have a player that understands what it means to be a good teammate and be a leader. That sometimes speaks more than the ability to throw the ball 65 yards on a dime. Because when you're making mistakes and you're giving everything you got out there, your team's going to have your defense. Like they said, we got your back, man. We know it. And it was a beautiful thing to see. And the other side of it, Zach Wilson, more concerned about, plugging holes than he is throwing balls. So, fuck him. And I can't wait to boo his ass on Sunday, whether he's on the sideline or on the field. So,
and that's so wild to me that you can't even take charge of your team. Like that's you need to own it. And Caden Whitlow, one of our producers here, he had said it. And the guy comes from, a great family, comes from wealth. He hasn't been really challenged throughout. He's a great high school player, did his thing at BYU, got picked high to a New York team in that market. Everything has been pretty much handed to the kid.
Not much adversity.
Right, not much adversity. You need to know when it's your fault to take that and own it. And it'll go a long ways, not only for yourself and your own understanding of who you are as a player and who you need to be, but as well as your teammates, especially a defense that only allowed 3 points up until, they only allowed 3 points. The special teams is what gave up the touchdown. Yeah. But yeah, I totally agree. I did not see that until you were talking.
Dude,
until we were
they
talking
had
about
2.77 inches per play in the second half on average. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, there. And some of you guys know what that looks like. So that's not very fucking far, man. And so. And as we talk about 2.7 inches, and I see AB's comment in here about Treylon Burks, and so I wanted to segue over to some guys as we are going into week 12. Some players that but some players that if you have them on your roster, these are guys that are probably going to take you to, give you some matchup. Give you, some of those positive projections before the games even start, because these guys are playing lights out fantasy wise. And also, that just means they're playing lights out on the field. And so Ivan and I were talking about this a little bit earlier before we jumped on, and it was just these guys are rostered in most all leagues, but just the stats are speaking to them really putting out great production week 9, 10, 11, through the buys, what have you, and I just want to start with someone that haven't talked about yet, but I've seen it in the comments, Treylon Burks. He is a guy that is really, we love this dude. I think that was one of Phil's guys when we went into, the preseason, pre-draft talk. And, there was video, Draft Mob did their thing and broke down Treylon Burks. And he's really come into his own. Him and Tannehill definitely have built some chemistry. Now that he's healthy, he had 18.1 fantasy points in week 11. He had 7 catches with 111 yards. He's a top 40 wide receiver moving forward, which is, if you take top 2 on each, you got, do the math, you got 64. So he's one of the better receivers in the league right now, statistically speaking. And I like seeing that. He had a career high receptions last week. He leads the team, team high in receiving yards last week. He's still only playing 50% of the snaps, and he's putting up this type of production. He put up the 18.1 fantasy points against a really tough Green Bay defense. I think Mr. Burks is kind of stepping into the spotlight. I know I briefly talked about Christian Watson being one of those rookies, but I really see Treylon Burks coming into his own, not only helping the Titans make a playoff push, but I think he's going to help your roster win some big games, big matchups, and hopefully win you guys some money.
Nino Brown, he agrees with you. I agree with you. They brought him in to be AJ Brown. Well, not to be AJ Brown, but to be the heir apparent to AJ Brown. AJ Brown had a rough game. He was a dud last week. I think he had 9 points.
Good call, man.
Yeah, he was a dud last week. But Treylon Burks, similar to Christian Watson, had a slow start. You expect some rookies to be, a little slow. I didn't expect Christian Watson because of the talent of his quarterback. But hey, fuck him. You know what I mean? Like if he ends up, sliding more and starts showing his age, I'm all for it. The double. There you go. But Treylon Burks, with Tannehill and him emerging as a guy that he could trust, that Tennessee team in a division that's not good in that AFC South. Tennessee looks like a team that can really contend. They got a solid defense. They have a solid running game. We already know who's there at running back. Their quarterback and Ryan Tannehill, he's a guy you could trust. Has proven it, in his time in the NFL and actually, coming from Miami and proving it all over again with Tennessee, and he's continued to do so. I think adding a guy like a Treylon Burks is just, the perfect match. You get a young guy who's could buy into the team philosophy, could buy into the quarterback, who's learning from the quarterback. I really like it.
Yeah, he could end up being that stretch run hero for you, him and Tannehill, if Tannehill's playing well and he's slinging it all over the field, Treylon Burks being a wide receiver wide receiver one there in Nashville is fucking huge, man. I really like that combination. I got a couple claims on Tannehill right now for tomorrow. My backup plan with Fields being hurt in a couple of leagues. So, I'm a big Treylon Burks fan fantasy wise. And, we as Bears fans, we don't have any skin in that game. So, hey, if he does well, good for him. Hope he kills the Packers whenever he plays them. But is there a guy that you like, Ivan, as we talk about this, or well,
actually, there's a guy, because I know you made the list, Chris, but we were talking about it before, and I had told everybody not to go after the kid because he was just having a horrible start to the season. Like I said, it's similar to Watson and Burks, right? Like very, very slow, very just, is this guy ever going to get going? Isaiah Pacheco, averaging 10. He had 10.7 fantasy points in week 11, 15 rushes for 107 yards. He's a top 24 running back. He's, moving forward. He's pretty much solidified that starting spot in KC. You know what I mean? They can't trust Hilaire. Or is Hilaire hurt?
He's hurt. He did get hurt.
He's
I think he's
hurt.
got an
He's hurt.
ankle. And then McKinnon,
Right.
he got a little nicked up too, but he's,
Right.
I think, RB2 now, you know?
Right. I think they wanted, this is what they wanted from the start with Pacheco. Maybe it just took some time to get acclimated with the speed or get acclimated with whatever play calls or what have you. But I think he's a guy that you should go out and belay the last statement that I made prior to this day.
If he's available,
go out and get an Isaiah Pacheco. Yep. I think he's earned at least a look. At the very least, man. A look. Right.
And a nice schedule coming up, a good playoff schedule. They got Houston, Seattle, and Denver. And he had, speaking of McKinnon had 7 touches. Our boy Pacheco had 15, so he doubled the output there. That's a great call. I have one of my dynasty leagues. I have the entire KC backfield. I have McKinnon, I have Pacheco, and I have, I started Pacheco. I'm making a run in one of my leagues because of this guy. Speaking of having a guy like this rostered, giving you that edge on, these guys have the old tried and true, and and all of a sudden you're coming in with some fresh legs, rookies, and they're producing. So kudos to you if you were able to pick up some of these guys. So I'm going to recommend another young running back, and that'd be out in Pittsburgh, Najee Harris. He's a guy that over the last couple of weeks is definitely, with as well as Kenny Slingett or Pickett or whatever his name is doing it in Pittsburgh. Najee he could have been a star for us on our list. 27.6 fantasy points in week 11, 20 carries, 90 yards on the ground, 2 tuds, 4 catches for another 26 yards. Top 20 running back. It's the second straight game of over 20 rushing attempts. So that's what you like to see as you move forward. You have an injury to their backup running back is that Jaylen Warren. And what am I reading here? Yeah, 3 straight games of over 4 yards per, 4+ yards per catch. So anytime he's getting the ball in his hands, he's producing. And so that looks like a fantasy point per time he touches the ball. That's a great thing. And so I like Najee Harris moving forward, especially in that offense. I think he's a guy that's going to help your roster. Again, like as we talk, these are players that are already rostered, but they're stars. These are like your stretch run heroes that we think are going to take you guys to playoff land, and hopefully you guys win the tournament at the end, or you guys have like a final pot for the regular season, most fantasy points or whatever. These guys are producing. Put them in your lineup. We talked about a couple of these guys already, but is there anybody else you want to rattle off here?
No, let me just add because Najee, and you got to give him credit because it's been rough for the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? It's been rough sledding. The franchise hasn't been used to looking this bad. You know what I mean? But Najee in particular had a rough go. And I thought Najee was going to just take off and be that dude. And, luckily he's come back because a lot of people were talking about going out and getting Jaylen Warren because Najee was having such a difficult time. But I agree with you. He's been tearing it up as of late. So go out and get a Najee Harris. Trust in Najee Harris. Sticking with that, that team, Pat Freiermuth. You got him. He's 15.9 fantasy points in week 11, 8 catches, 79 yards. Top 5 tight end moving forward. Team high 12 targets, averaging 29% target share. His last 2 games played, 7+ targets in 4 straight games. And he's got a good schedule. You got it listed here. It's Indianapolis, Atlanta, Baltimore, Carolina, and Vegas. And I would say, 3 of those teams, I know for a fact, are not great defenses.
Yep.
You know what I mean? 3 of those teams are not great. And the other 2, you can, maybe put a hurting on as well. They're not somebody out, something. They're not world beaters. They're not guys that I, are teams that I fully trust on defense.
That's a great schedule for Freiermuth. That's a great schedule for Najee Harris. I mean, that's fantasy point production. Indy, Atlanta, Baltimore. I mean, Baltimore, tougher. You got to deal with Roquan and the boys. But, Carolina and Vegas, that could take you right into, like we talked about, that could take you right into the playoffs in the Super Bowl for your fantasy league. So,
Bob, hold that question. We're going to get to your questions at the.
I got one more because it's relevant because we're Bears people and we are Bears fans and we love this man. I don't think we love them as much as DDP, but David Montgomery is a man that is going to help you out significantly. You got Herbert on the IR. Ebner just, he had six rushes for 8 yards, but Week 11, David had his, best week of the season at 21.1 fantasy points on 17 rushes for 67 yards and a touchdown. He even caught a couple balls, obviously, like he normally does. Missed one catch, 3 for 54. Top 15 running back. He is their primary back in every situation. 3-down territory all day long right now. 77% of the running back opportunities in this offense last week. He led the team in receiving yards. And we speak in the schedule, they have Philly, Buffalo, and Detroit, which is a pretty good playoff schedule for fantasy, especially with the amount of times he's getting the ball in his hands right now. I honestly think that I think David Montgomery is in for a strong finish to the season, and he'll hit that number for everybody that bet the 800-yard over before we started the season. If you ended up getting in on that on FanDuel, so. Those are some guys that, I wanted to, kind of talk about. I know we brought it up kind of last minute, Ivan, so I appreciate you kicking around that idea or that, these players with me. But I thought it was important because these are some fantasy stars over the last couple of weeks that I thought would really, kind of shed some light on what you could see for your next couple of weeks if they're on your roster, which would be good things.
It's very important because, like you said, we're getting into the nitty-gritty. We're getting into the nitty-gritty, the meat or the
last couple of weeks.
The last couple of seasons. It's getting down to the wire, and you need to know these guys because and some, like we said, we try to give you guys surprising picks, the waiver wire. We try to give you guys that are just kind of like, oh wow, this guy, if you haven't seen him, this guy's been consistent. Like Jackle he put together a great list of players that we just read off to you. Had some good stats here, and just try to give you guys as much help and help ourselves kind of at the same time with the fantasy picks. But it's just been that was a great segment. I think we should do something more like that moving forward. But let's go ahead and get into this injury report. Now, we'll start with QB1. How about that? We'll start with QB1 on the injury report. A lot of misinformation going about. Ian Rappaport reporting, and I got the tweet right here. Hashtag Bears QB Justin Fields suffered a left shoulder dislocation, which is not confirmed. Sources say a painful injury he somehow played through on Sunday. Coach Matt Eberflus described Fields as day-to-day. His status for Sunday is still to be determined, and that he's right about Eberflus saying he's day-to-day. He's not, to this point that I could see or you could see, he's not correct about the dislocation.
Yeah, sounds like a separation.
Far. Yeah,
But the Bears are so quiet about it, right?
Right.
So the fact that they're not saying anything is, I don't think it's concerning. I think if it was a serious injury, they would shut him down immediately, and they would. Why wouldn't you make that known? I don't understand the benefit, especially they're not going for a playoff berth right now. Like it's just.
I think it's consistency with Eberflus. This is who he's going to be. Yeah, this is who he's going to be, and it goes into his coaching as well.
Yeah.
Right. The whole theme is and I talked to Olin with DDP when Olin was on Keeping It 100. I asked him about Lovey and how Lovey was. And there's so many comparisons to Lovey and Eberflus, not only in scheme, but just how they go about their business. You know what I mean? So I asked, and the biggest thing Olin said about Lovey was the consistency of the message. And I think that is exactly what Matt Eberflus is about as well. The consistency of the message. And you've heard it time and time again. You heard it from day one. If you're not going to buy in, you're not going to be here. If you're not going to hustle, you're not going to be here. So, it's like you can believe him to an extent, but I feel like if Justin's ready to go, you got to play him. You got to play him, and you got to start using the passing game with him. We have to see what he has. And I know he makes There's still some mistakes, but he has a horrific offensive line.
Yeah. I mean,
But
if
you
Simeon
still have
starts,
to see
Simeon
it.
is going to get absolutely destroyed. Like,
I believe
and Justin Fields makes the line look a little better because he is just that much of an amazing fucking uber athlete that he makes the toughest things look a little simpler, and he still has trouble fucking evading 3 defensive linemen and a linebacker every fourth play or whatever it is, because it's just how their offensive line is built right now. And so selfishly, I'd love for him to play, but if he is a dislocation, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean he tore anything. He could have stretched everything out. I've had, I'm not a professional athlete, but I mean, I've had I've played baseball my entire life, 3 major shoulder surgeries, and dislocating my shoulder a few times. And, one of the times I didn't tear anything, but I stretched the hell out of everything. And what happens from there is that now it just kept sliding out of socket. So it was just extremely uncomfortable. It's a subluxation of the shoulder, and it's horrible. So if he needs to have it fixed, he needs to get it done. So, and the Bears, they want to protect their investment. This guy is ultimately going to make $50 to $60 million a year in the NFL, and it could be being paid by the Bears in a couple of years. But he also could be the guy that leads us to the Super Bowl, and playing him in meaningless games in November and December on a team that isn't winning much. I mean, I get both sides of it, but I'm going this Sunday and I want to see this motherfucker play because I just want to, but I am going to probably see the Michael White, Trevor Siemian Bowl.
I couldn't agree more with you.
Yeah.
If he's healthy, play him. But if there's any shadow of a doubt, what's the smart play?
Yeah.
You sit him. You got in. I don't care about the Green Bay. I care about the Green Bay game as far as I want the Bears to win. What's more important, our future, or this game against Green Bay and in a down year where we could
end up with a top 3 pick, man.
Exactly, where we can end up with a top 3 pick. It all comes down to his health. It all comes down to QB1. Yeah. I hope he's healthy. Don't do something dumb. Eberflus. Another
if
guy
he plays though, but just
ahead.
real quick, if he plays, he's going against the Jets, and their defense has kept them in a lot of ball games, right? I mean, granted, so it's a tough matchup for Justin Fields if he is on the field. And I still think he could put up another 20-point fantasy week, which would just continue his streak that he is on at this point. So if he does play, I expect him to at least produce. You may see some more passing opportunities, but at the same time, their line, it just isn't conducive for him to sit back there and sling it. So, a couple of design plays, yes, but we've watched the games, right? It's, it's, oh shit, here we go, and we're off and running. So
and you can't win games off your back.
No, and there's a reason they lead. That they have more 10+ rushing yard plays this year now than they have in I think any season, and it's already week 11. I think Shane or somebody had sent that out this morning when we were looking at stats, because the plays break down and Fields is off and going, and he's the reason that stat is what it is. And the Bears are running for what they're running for. But what other injuries? Because we just went on a tangent about the Bears here, but let's speak to a couple injuries that were fantasy relevant.
Well, ironically, it happened against the Bears.
Yep.
Kyle Pitts took a shot, and you know what? Let me shout out Eddie Jackson, because I've been so critical of Eddie Jackson.
Yeah.
Eddie Jackson has been playing the way I wanted Eddie Jackson to play. I know Shane has said you have to be on Eddie. You got to go ahead and be, you have to push him. You have to push him. I'm glad he's being pushed here with Matt Eberflus, because Eddie has just been flying all over. He's been making tackles that he wasn't making last year or the year before. He's just been the consummate professional on this team. Yeah. He's been the big brother in that secondary that you wanted him to be, that you need him to be. And he's been doing it with his play. He's been doing it on and off the field, as we hear reports, and even him saying that he's taken guys under his wing. Eddie Jackson, shout him out. He gave a lick to Kyle Pitts, and Kyle Pitts ended up with an MCL.
With a little low, got it right above the knee, and fucking
I thought it was clean the way.
No flag.
Yeah, it was no flag. I thought it was clean. He was playing through him, and it just happened that time, there's nothing you could do about it. But torn MCL for Kyle Pitts. He will be on the IR. That's going to be a blow to Atlanta, even though he wasn't. It was a struggle. It's been a tough year for Kyle Pitts, a guy that we thought, and you had posted up. I think I still have the graphic. No, that's not the tight end graphic. That's a top 10 graphic. Well, anyway, as far as tight ends, he hasn't been producing. And we thought that he would produce. As I just double clicked there we go. We thought that he would produce, but now he's out for an extended period of time. Kyle Pitts, out for the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah. Another injury, Michael Williams comes back, gets out there, injured right away. He was a dud, if anyone started him, but something to monitor. It seems like he's gets the big money, and he hasn't been able to stay on the field. So that's something to keep an eye on. It was nice to speak of injuries. Keenan Allen coming back from this hammy that's been just absolutely destroying him, and he actually had a decent day. I look for Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen to rekindle that magic and, hopefully put up some fantasy points, which will help Josh Palmer, honestly. As we talked about him earlier, I think Keenan Allen coming back actually is only going to help Josh Palmer. There was a couple other injuries. There was, oh my goodness, what was his name? I'm trying to get to it right now. Do you have any injuries that you wanted to talk about, or did you wanted to?
We saw a game yesterday in which the Arizona, and I know they don't have. I'm going to go ahead and just list all three of the guys for them because there's a trio of guys that could be helping them right now. And excuse me while I burp that up. There's a trio of guys right now that are out for them. One being Kyler Murray.
Yep.
Kyler Murray hasn't really had a,
got the hamstring.
Got the hamstring. Hasn't had a really good, above and beyond top 10 season, in my opinion. But he's their best player. You could debate Hopkins, obviously, but he's obviously their greatest weapon on offense with his legs and with his arm. And not only is Kyler Murray out with a hamstring, but he's out two receivers in Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown with the foot, and Rondell Moore with the groin. So, if those guys continue to miss, and they're talking about Murray possibly being coming in after the bye, after their bye week, you're going to be out. It's going to be a tough time for Colt McCoy and the rest of the Cardinals. It's been a rough season for them anyway, and we talked about it and we mentioned it. We alluded to it before in the earlier parts of the show. I don't know if this team stays together. I don't know if they have the same personnel other than a Kyler Murray because he signed a contract. I don't know if they had the same personnel or the same team.
Cliffy's gone.
Yeah, coming into next season. They were expecting big things. They got nothing. Yeah. And it's been a rough go. Those three injuries are huge for the Cardinals. Jackle, you got any more?
I mean, like you talked about, you got Mixon with a concussion, Clyde Edwards-Helaire with the ankle injury. They cut the Broncos got rid of Melvin Gordon. That's not an injury. That's just a straight cut. And I'm trying to think, like we said, Juju Smith-Schuster still with a concussion. Kadarius Toney went out with an injury and don't know what's going on with him.
Right.
Cooper Kupp's obviously out with the surgery. We talked about Rondell Moore. Wan'Dale Robinson for the Giants, torn ACL. It's tough to see. And, I think that's really – we talked about Zach Ertz last week. I don't know. Are there any other injuries really fantasy relevant at this point?
Well, how about a segue into the waiver wire?
Perfect.
Jamison Williams, right, has been out all year.
Guy.
He's been out all year with the knee, tore his ACL in the championship game. He's been practicing this week. He's been practicing. They've been trying to get him going, trying to push maybe to – I don't know if he's going to be there on Thursday.
They got 21 days, right? So they got to get him out. Yeah.
I don't know if he's going to be there on Thursday, but within that 21-day grace period, you could see him on the field. If he's practicing, like I said, and I know we had a lot of talk about players, being active and being ready to go this past BHL. But if he's active and ready to go, why wouldn't you start him if you're the Lions? You're on a 3-game winning streak. You're essentially, you're in second place. Like
he's a good stash if you can grab him right now.
Yeah, if you could grab him, you'll be great. But for the Lions, like if you add a weapon like that, I think they would absolutely go to him. And like you said, if the Lions are just trying to make a name for themselves, I don't think anybody is going to be sitting. I don't think anybody's going to be taking a rest.
They're winning games, man.
Yeah, I think they're going to be playing guys throughout this year, and I feel like a Jameson Williams healthy and ready to go is going to be targeted quite often in that offense. I would go ahead and be cautious because he is hurt still, or he's listed as injured, that grace period. But maybe take a look at the waiver wire and maybe picking him up and stashing him.
Yeah, rostered in 31% of the leagues right now. I think that's a great call. We talked about him last week as a guy to stash if you did not, and neither did anybody else in your league. He's someone you definitely want to try to grab. I think pairing him with Amon St. Brown, that's definitely a nice combination. That's a great call, man. I think I want to stay with rookies and I want to stay with wide receivers. And it's a guy that we were high on here at TTNL in the offseason, Sky Moore. Kind of coming into his own, with all the injuries in Kansas City, like we talked about earlier, Juju Smith-Schuster, McCole Hardman, guys are hurt, and Sky Moore's only rostered in 9% of the leagues. And I just think a dude that, 12 receptions on 20 targets, making the most of his opportunities. I'm a fan of Sky Moore. I think he's a guy that you can go out and get. He had a limited role against the Rams. He may have a limited role against the Rams, but he may also be wide receiver one if those dudes are out. So he's either going to eat or he's going to be a complimentary piece, and you may not want to start him. But if you look at that roster report, the injury report on Saturday and Sunday, and those, they're out, then I'd be starting Sky Moore in a big matchup game. And I do that with confidence based on that offense with Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, and like our guy Pacheco running the ball. I just think that's a nice little triple-headed monster of offensive weapons there, with Mahomes at the helm. So those are a couple of rookies that I think you can get on the waiver wire. And like I said, he's rostered in less than 10% of the leagues,
Another guy, and we talked about him earlier, Joshua Palmer. He's only rostered in 64.3% of the leagues. If he's available, go get him. Like I said, I had my thoughts about him. Obviously, everybody in the chat saying, hey, he's that dude. You're saying it as well, Jackle. I trust you. So I'm going to go ahead and say, go ahead and get a Joshua Palmer if you haven't already. This past week, if you just want to hear some stats from this week, 106 yards, 4+ catches of over 20 yards, or 4 catches of plus 20 yards, and 2 touchdowns for 30.6 points. Going to be a factor. Factor because we know that receiver room for the Chargers is hit or miss. And I know they have 2 big names in Mike Williams and in Keenan Allen. But if you can't trust them to stay on the field, that there's a guy that's there. You know what I'm saying? He's going to get the target. So Joshua Palmer for me.
Nice. Perfect. All right. You want to stick to wide receivers? We talked about Treylon Burks. I'm going to talk about a replacement for Rondale Moore, Greg Dortch. A guy that every time that Rondale Moore has been out, this guy has stepped up and made the most of his opportunities. Dortch is rostered in 3% of the leagues right now. He's basically a must start if Rondale Moore is out. He stepped right into his role last night in Mexico City. He had 10 targets on 9 catches for 103 yards. When Moore has been out, when he was out with the hamstring injury earlier, Dortch, he had 13 fantasy points in each of the first 3 games he played. So this guy steps in and produces. And he is a guy that is not really rostered, like I said, in less than 5%, 3%, depending on where you look. But yeah, that's a guy to go out and try to grab if you are hurting at the wide receiver spot.
Yeah, no doubt. And we're going to stay with the receiver spot. Guy that we had mentioned before, Treylon Burks. He's only rostered in 21.4% of the leagues out there right now. Go out and get him. Like I said, the Titans are a threat for the playoffs. They got a good quarterback. They got a good running game. Play action is in effect, especially with a big body receiver. You've seen the big playmaking ability downfield from Treylon Burks in college, and you're going to see it coming here soon, I feel like, in the pros. So go out and get a Treylon Burks.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I'm going to switch it up and go to running backs and the running back rooms here. We've talked about Singletary. I brought up James Cook earlier, but he's a guy rostered in just under 30% of leagues. He's, against Cleveland, he had 11 carries for 86 yards. He's clearly, he's the handcuff for Devin Singletary. Not necessarily like a lottery ticket, but he's a guy that, with respects to matchups and how things are playing out, it's keep an eye on him. If he's a guy you could stash, you just don't know. If this role continues and he continues to get more touches, I think it's something that could turn, they're obviously getting production from the running backs. Singletary is playing well, obviously, like we talked about, running angry. But, there's production there. And I think, James Cook's another guy that you could go out and scoop up on the waiver wire or, put in about 5 to 10% of your fab and get a guy that many people may not go and grab just because Singletary is doing so well. People may be like, he's not going to play that much. But if you look at the numbers, he's actually putting up, so he's getting the ball in his hands too.
Guy, I'm going to go ahead and bounce from running back real quick. We could come back to it. Juwan Johnson, tight end for the New Orleans Saints.
Absolutely.
Been consistent. You know what I mean? I'll read the number. He's averaged 10 fantasy points over the last 3 weeks. Over the last 5 weeks, let me just read out. And he had an outlier one. Not an outlier because he's done it twice this year, but he had 15.2 against the Arizona Cardinals. Had a dud week against the Las Vegas Raiders with 1.4. But the past 3 weeks, 10.2, 10.4, 10.7. If you need tight end help, and I know you do, because tight ends have not been, like I said, they haven't been great. They haven't been all world this year. Go out and get a guy like a Juwan Johnson. Take a shot at him. Might get you 10 points next week. You know what I mean?
And, it sucks that you don't want to be, touchdown dependent, right? But he scored a touchdown in his last 3 games and 4 out of his last 5. He's got 47 targets on the year for 31 catches, 350 receiving yards with, like we talked about, 5 touchdowns for an average of just under 9 fantasy points. So, like you talked about, Ivan, it's hard to find these tight ends that are worth a salt right now because of everything that's happened in the NFL. But he's a guy that clearly, and he's rostered in less than 40% of the league. So why wouldn't you want to go out and try to get a guy like this if you're dealing with a Zach Ertz injury, or you're just, you're banking on Cole Kmet, but now he's hurt, or, Justin's hurt. Do you think Simeon's going to have time to throw the ball? Who knows? So you may need to go out and get a tight end. That's a good call, man. I like that. I'm gonna just piggyback a comment here because Donovan Peoples-Jones is a dude that I know we've talked about before on this show. He is a guy that is going to benefit from. He benefited from Brissett, but I think with Deshaun Watson coming back, DPJ is rostered in 64% of the leagues. He's got almost 600 receiving yards. He's only found the end zone once. But he has scored 11 PPR, fantasy points in his last 5 games. He scored like I just said, he scored his first touchdown in week 11. But he has Watson coming back in week 13. I think you could see a nice pairing between him, Watson, and also, with the underrated, like the severely underrated Amari Cooper this year. Yeah. I think you could, not saying they're going to be, I was going to say world beaters, probably a bad thing to say, but like they're going to, I think that offense, if Watson can catch up to the game is not too fast for him or whatever, and doesn't have lotion on his hands and he can throw the ball, I think at the end of the day, he could be, he could be pretty successful. I like Donovan Peoples-Jones, man. I think it'd be a nice pickup.
Shame on you, Chris.
Shame on him. Fuck him.
Yeah, fuck him too. But not fuck Chris, but like,
I got you.
I love you, but shame on him. Like, he's.
But shame on me.
Shame on you. He's a piece of shit. Anyway,
who do you got? Talk to me.
To be honest with you, I'm pretty much. I would take a shot at, and it's hard because the Giants don't have a receiving threat, right? They've been hurting. Why don't you take a shot at Wan'Dale Robinson? If he's been on the injury report.
No, he tore his ACL.
Wan'Dale
Robinson.
I thought it was.
Yeah, he tore the ACL.
See, this one just says knee.
Yeah.
Okay, well, never mind Wan'Dale Robinson, but you got Richie James and you have Slayton in there. I was going to talk about all three of those guys. I think that you're going to get some target. Daniel Jones hasn't been bad. He has not been bad at all. This past week, Daniel Jones was top 3 in fantasy. He had 27 completions, 44 attempts, 61.4 completion percentage, 341 yards.
Yep.
Had 2 picks, had a touchdown, but had 26.6 fantasy points. You know he could do it with his legs. He had a touchdown on the ground. He had over 50 yards rushing. You know he could do it with his legs. But as far as the receivers go, you know, his receiving, it really hasn't been consistent anyway. They traded Kadarius Toney. You know what I'm saying? Like, it really hasn't been consistent. So I would say maybe take a shot at a Richie James. Take a shot at a Darius Slayton.
I like that Ricky James.
He's pretty fast. He's pretty
rostered in 2% of the leagues, Ivan. You know, and he got all of his targets last week after Wan'Dale got hurt. So with Wan'Dale's injury, next man up with the Giants, they need receivers, like you said. That's why Odell's visiting this week. I think I think it's between him, the Giants, Buffalo, and Dallas. So it'll be interesting to see where Odell ends up. But yeah, I do like him. I think he's a guy where taking advantage of an opportunity, and like you said, the Giants, Daniel Jones has been sharing the ball around. Darius Slayton is another one. I think those are 2 guys that if you can get your hands on, you definitely want to try out and grab.
And I think it's probably the best thing for Daniel Jones because he can't really focus in on one guy. He's got to spread it around. I mean, you don't have I mean, you could probably develop a relationship with one guy, but who's the guy that's going to go ahead and be all world for you?
Yeah.
He's not there. So you're going to, Richie James, Slayton, guys that he could trust, but are going to get more targets because of injuries. Maybe take a look and stash them on your bench.
Yeah. Yeah, those are some great waiver claims. I think we kind of, wide receivers, quarterback. We didn't talk about really quarterbacks. There's not many to really, go out and grab. I think Tannehill's the only guy really to kind of go out and target. You could try to ride the Taylor Heineke train if you think it's worth getting involved in, or Kenny Pickett. But do you want to do a little start and sit and wrap things up? What do you want to do? We're looking, we're hour and 15 in here. So
we'll do a little start and sit. But before we do a little start and sit, guys, we have a new, not new, but we have new merchandise in the swag shop for TTNL. New hats are now here available. You guys can go ahead and on www.ttnlswag.com and get you guys some new hats. We got new designs. We go ahead and click this one here. New TTNL designs. We got the front here on this one.
That's a snapback, right?
And the back, that's the snapback. We also had the dad cap, which is...
That's how you sell it, calling it a dad cap.
Calling it a dad. Dads everywhere are going to flock to this hat, I hope. But yeah, we have it available in black and blue in the swag shop. So go ahead and get you some TTNL swag, get you some TTNL hats. And
where do you go to get that, Ivan?
www.ttnlswag.com.
Yes, sir.
All right, now let's go ahead and get into starts and sits and wrap this thing up.
Yeah, man.
Let's go start with Thanksgiving, right? Thanksgiving. I think the Vikings are going to bounce back. I think the Vikings and Dalvin Cook are going to bounce back. I would go ahead and start TJ Hawkinson. I know Bob had a question about that with Freiermuth and Hawkinson. I'm going to go ahead and start TJ Hawkinson. I think he's going to be targeted a lot this game. I think the Vikings are going to be a team on the out for blood. I really do. I think that they're going to be very focused in on this game after getting their asses whooped, putting porn stars up on the Jumbotron and shit like that. I'm going to go with a TJ Hawkinson. I think he's going to have a big game against the Patriots.
Okay. I'm going to get to it. I have a sit from the Vikings that I'll get into when we get to sits. But for a start, I'm going to go with our guy, Jimmy G. I think he going against New Orleans, week 10, he had a pretty crappy week, but, bounced back last night. But this week against New Orleans, Garoppolo should be able to continue to put up quality numbers. The Saints have allowed an average of almost 19.3 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks in the last 3 weeks. I think Garoppolo has a very favorable matchup. I think, and we talked about their offense and how it's clicking on all cylinders. We broke it down pretty extensively, earlier on in the show. I think Jimmy G is a nice start this week against the Saints. So kick it back to you, Ivan. You're muted, brother. Where'd you go?
My bad.
That's okay.
I wanted to jump into a question real quick because I think it's pretty solid. It's kind of going into what
Holy shit.
It starts and sits. He's got Mac Jones, Kenny Pickett, Ryan Tannehill, Matt Stafford, Tom Brady. I'm going to go with Ryan Tannehill in this one. All the reasons we were talking about. The Bengals have been on a rise, but I feel like their defense is still susceptible to giving up points. Right? They're not a defense that's like going to completely blank you, especially if you have the offense to go and match up with them. Last week they gave up 30 points to the Steelers. You know what I mean? The game was 37-30. And we know all the struggles of the Steelers. It's been well documented this year. But I feel like a guy like Ryan Tannehill is able to go ahead and put up some good numbers. We talked about Treylon Burks. We talked about their running game. And I just feel like Ryan Tannehill with his mobility and the play action game with Derrick Henry and Treylon Burks and the receivers that they have there, I think that's going to be more beneficial for you than starting any of the other guys. Also, Matt Stafford's out with a concussion.
Yeah, Stafford's hurt. I mean, Tom Brady's arguably a top 10 fantasy quarterback right now. He's average. Last week he had a pretty solid day with 260 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have an interception, but that's tough. I like Tannehill. We talked about him earlier. But I think Tom Brady, it's Tom Brady. I think if he's available or you have him, I feel like he's the guy to start. And just in terms of like where they sit in rankings, all the other guys kind of are much lower down the board. I mean, we're talking all those other dudes are like after top 25. So, I mean, Tom Brady to me statistically would, if you're going to play the numbers, you're going to want to go with Tom Brady.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, now we go. Tom, yeah. I got Tom. Or I got Ryan. Jackle's got Tom. Let's go ahead and move forward. Let me go ahead and switch.
I mean, you can't go wrong with Tannehill, though, man. I mean,
no,
he's had 20 fantasy points 4 out of his 7 games he's played in this year. Mm-hmm. So, like, he's putting up numbers when he's healthy and he's out there, So, yeah, I could see why you'd say that. I definitely can't hate you on that pick, man. That's not you can't go wrong either way. I think with those two.
Another guy I want to go ahead quarterback wise.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, they're a surprise. They're a surprise in the league. I'll say that at 6-5, and they are at the bottom of the NFC East. But the Washington Commanders have been putting up some good numbers, and I think Tyler Heineke is going to have himself a day against a bad Atlanta Falcons secondary. They're top 3 worst secondary, defenses and giving up receiving points off or passing yardage. I think Tyler Heineke might feast with the receiving core that he has there in Washington. Scary Terry, and it was not Chris Samuels.
Yeah, Chris Samuels.
Yeah, Chris Samuels. Okay, and Chris Samuels. I think Tyler Heineke's a start. I really do. I think it might be a stretch. But I think you could have a quality game with the Tyler Heineke against a very bad secondary of the Atlanta Falcons.
I mean, the Falcons have given up over 21 fantasy points, on average to opposing quarterbacks this year. So I think, there's a reason that you can say that with some confidence, Ivan. Mm-hmm. Granted, in the last 3 weeks, Heineke's combined had 28 fantasy points, which isn't necessarily good, but matchups are matchups, and in this situation it is extremely helpful for him to be playing the Falcons. I think all the receivers could have a nice little fantasy day, but they're definitely, Gibson's been producing as well on the fantasy side, running the ball for the Commanders as well. So I think Heineke wouldn't be a bad start if you're streaming quarterbacks right now. No, you can't go wrong there. Not bad at all.
You got any more, Jackle?
I mean, I think Demarcus Robinson's a must start. Going up against Jacksonville, he gets a really intriguing matchup, where the Jaguars are a team that have an average of 35.5 fantasy points to the opposing wide receivers in their last 2 games. And they have given up just under 30 fantasy points on the year. And that's they rank 8th in that on the season. So they're just giving up air yards, or yards in the air. And Demarcus Robinson, who is just coming off a strong week. I know we talked about earlier about inconsistency, but I think this is a favorable matchup for him. And I like Demarcus Robinson, wide receiver for Baltimore, as a start this week.
All right, that sounds good. I like him too. I mean, like I said, anybody that's going, other than Mark Andrews, that's going to give you an opportunity in the passing game, you're going to have to go ahead and try that out. If you're Baltimore, if you're a fantasy owner, he's probably the only guy that at receiver that I would trust. So Demarcus Robinson is a good pick. Like that pick, Jackal. Let's get to some questions and wrap this thing up. Put a nice little bow on it.
You got any sits real quick that just glare at you like don't start me, or
I'll list one.
You're always good for one.
I wouldn't start Darnell Mooney. A guy, honestly, I wouldn't start any receiver against the Jets. As bad as the Jets offense is, the Jets defense is a top quality unit on that team. It's the thing that's keeping them going, keeping them relevant, especially with a guy like Breece Hall out. To be honest, I don't know why did they leave Jolton Joe Flacco in there? You know what I mean?
I may see him Sunday.
You might see. I hope it's not I hope you see Joe Flacco, because I thought Joe was doing a decent job, leadership wise, and actually putting up numbers. I think Joe led them against that comeback win against the Browns this year. So anyway, that defense top notch. But like I said, the Bears without Justin Fields, even with Justin Fields, I'm a little nervous.
Mooney.
Sauce Gardner is that dude. Like he's as advertised.
Yep.
So I would sit the Bears. No Mooney. Komet, maybe a different story, but no Mooney, no Claypool.
He's gonna have to block.
Yeah, he's gonna have to block. No Mooney, no Claypool, and that's where I'm at with that.
Okay.
Let's go to a couple questions here, and before we leave, Logan asks, Burks or Slayton for the rest of the year? I think that's an obvious one. I would go with Treylon.
We've talked extensively about Treylon Burks and the production that he has had, and he's one of those dudes that have turned it on over the last few weeks.
Yeah, no doubt. Like I said, Darius Slayton, it's hit or miss. Like, pick him up and stash him.
Too inconsistent right
with
now.
Richie James. Like I said, I would pick them up and stash him just because of the injuries, and they're the next guy up. But as far as talent and putting up numbers, you got Burks on a playoff team. I know Slayton's on a playoff team, but you got Burks on a team that I think is probably going to actually do something in these next couple weeks.
Burks
I feel like
doing
the Giants
50% of the snaps too, and that's only going to go up. And I think that's what is a big thing to think about. Is he's doing this with Tannehill, who is now healthy. Also, this is also a guy that was dealing with the rookie Malik Willis was playing quarterback for a little bit, and that wasn't what we were hoping to see. When he got out there. So I think Treylon Burks, Slayton is. What has he done all year? I mean, I think the Giants have had a revolving door at receiver, and they're trying to just fill a need. I just don't think there's the consistency there, and you're starting to see more of that with Treylon Burks.
Right. I like I said, I think Treylon Burks is emerging to be a feature, a number one in that offense. Slayton, although like I said, I would take shots at Richie James and Slayton. Slayton's not emerging to be a number one. Slayton's number one because of injury. He's going to get a lot of
He's
targets.
had 4 straight
Might
weeks of double-digit fantasy points, and I mean that's nothing to sneeze at. But I just think you're going to get the ceiling is higher, I think, with Burks than it is for Slayton. Yeah.
Correct. I know this isn't fantasy related, but I guess we could answer it anyway before we go ahead and close. This will be the last one. I know we answered a lot of questions just throughout the show. Yeah, during the show. Isn't top 3 a quarterback spot? I think Gregory's talking about Justin Fields. Are the Bears picking in the top 3? Excuse me, of next year's draft? What do you do? Do you trade down?
You wait and see what it shakes out, and then you wait until the last minute, and you trade down, and you fucking get more draft picks and get the guy you want.
Like I said, I think they're gonna go ahead and get the kid from Georgia, the D tackle from Georgia.
I mean, that's not a bad thing either.
If the juice is worth the squeeze, yes. Yeah. Like, what are they offering you? What's going to be the commitment from the other team? Where are you gonna where are you gonna be picking up those picks at? You know what I'm saying? Like, and how much? How much is it gonna be? Is it gonna be guys that you get this year? Because I would want at least 2 this year. You know what I mean? Like, I want 2 picks this year. I want your first, and then I want probably your third to get that top 3 or your second. Or your second, if that's the case.
The top 3
I wouldn't. Pick. Yeah, I would take that would be where I would go. You're going to give me your first, but you're also going to give me either a 2 or a 3, and then we could talk about extending, the rest of it. Maybe you get a 5th next year or the year after or whatever, however you work it out. But if you're going to trade down, you're getting the first, but you make sure you get a 2 or a 3. Otherwise, after that, it don't fucking matter. But otherwise, no dice. Like, there's not going to be a chance. Go draft the defensive tackle from Georgia, and that'll be that. Or whoever's on their big board, whoever they want, whoever they had marked as a top guy, they're going to go get. But how do you feel, Jackle?
Yeah, I mean, I talked earlier. It depends on who declares for the draft and what teams, where everybody falls. Because if there are guys that need quarterbacks and there are teams that are trying to get up to get these guys, Ryan Poles is no dummy. I mean, I don't think he's going to trade to like the end of the first round. I just think he's going to maximize the position the best way to help the Bears be successful. And if that means they miss out on that defensive, the defensive tackle, and they end up with, a receiver, I still think they're going to address the defense through the draft, in my opinion. But it's still draft a receiver, but not early on.
You think somebody will give him? Do you think somebody will give him 2 1s? I think that's too rich. I mean,
it depends, man. It all depends on the team. I mean, look at what the Niners gave up for Trey Lance, and look at what the Eagles and the Dolphins worked out for trades. And
look what we gave up for Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, exactly. But there was a question here that someone had asked. I think they were looking for, hey, by the way, you can go either way with Slayton or Burks. I just think Burks is trending. Slayton is an average of 4 catches over the last 4 games, so it's not like he's pounding the pavement. He's been consistent, but I think Burks is going to give you an opportunity to put up a monster day. I just see the chat going off about these guys, which is okay. We got a difference of opinion. That's completely fine, and that's the beauty of it. But to the point of, do you like David Montgomery or Dameon Pierce in a 0.5 PPR league? No, this will be our last.
We're talking about this week.
Yeah.
Yep. Dameon Pierce. Well, let me see who Dameon Pierce is playing.
He's playing Miami. He's playing against Miami. They're neck and neck for rankings, like wide running back 17 and running back 19. So
I'm gonna go with Dameon Pierce just because I fear that Jets defense more than I fear the Miami defense, if that makes sense. I think the Jets defense has the ability to go ahead and shut anybody down. But no matter what. But I could be wrong. I mean, I absolutely could be wrong. David Montgomery, it would be a solid pick. But if you're asking me, gun to my head right now, I'm going to go with Dameon Pierce.
Yeah. I like Monty. I don't know if I don't think it's homerism. I think it's I just think what they have, the amount of shares that he's getting with respects to, the injuries to their backfield. I just I like Monty. I just, especially if Simeon is the quarterback, you could see a lot of dink and dunk with Montgomery and just, help me out, David. Here's the ball, run type stuff for him. So he could either get a lot of touches and, do well with it. But for this week coming out, I don't know. I'm going to go with Montgomery. So we'll find out next week and we could talk about it, in our week 12 review in the beginning of the show.
Hopefully the tripod will be back. You know what I mean? The trio with me, you, and Claudio. We'll be back in full force next week. But thank you guys for joining us. It's been
Ebner
great.
had 6 carries, by the way. I don't know, Noah. 6 carries on 8 yards. I don't know if that's too many carries.
I mean, I wouldn't have gave him 6. Yeah. I'd have gave him 3 and just been like, here, David, take the other 3. But yeah, Ebner's been a disappointment. But anyway, guys, like I said, it's been great. Night. It's been great. Have a good night. We appreciate the support. Before we leave, make sure you go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to the Tape Never Lies Network. Make sure you go ahead and become a patron if you want more breakdowns, more footage, more tape, more shows with DDP, Eric Kramer, Cars Keys when it's not unlocked. You got a great lineup there on the patron side. Make sure you go to the tapeneverlies.com and become a patron. Also, the swag shop, like we showed you before. Yep. Go ahead. The new hats are in. Go get you a new hat. Represent the network that we love. And happy Thanksgiving to you guys. Jackle, I'm every week, like we talk about it on, off air. We're excited every week to come here and do this and be a part of it and share and talk ball with you guys. So it's not a chore for us. This is like a treat every week to come and talk football, talk fantasy, and just be here and chatting up with you guys. Absolutely, it's an awesome experience. But anyway, before I go ahead and just talk myself out of everything, we're going to get out of here. For Chris Jackle, I'm Ivan Vargas. This has been Keepin It Fantasy on the Tape Never Lies Network. Peace.
Take it easy.
What's your fantasy? Keepin' it fantasy, what's your football fantasy?